My nanny was giving my baby cold baths in ice water, saying, "Soft children become weak adults. Stop crying, Noah. Weakness leaves the body through tears, and we're eliminating yours." The words jolted me awake at 6 in the morning. Through the baby monitor, I heard ice cubes clinking against porcelain. My 6-month-old son's screams were inhuman, primal, wrong. I grabbed my phone and opened the monitor app. The video showed Olivia holding Noah under running water, his tiny body convulsing. I was running before my brain fully processed what I was seeing. The bathroom door stood open. Noah was submerged to his shoulders in the sink, ice water surrounding him, his lips purple-black, his eyes rolled back. He'd stopped screaming. Now he just made these broken, gasping sounds. Olivia stood over him with her phone in one hand, completely calm, watching a timer count down on her screen. "He's almost done." She looked up at me with genuine pride in her eyes. "Just 2 more minutes and his toughness score improves to level 4. He's been stuck at level 3 for a week, but this session is finally breaking through his resistance threshold. The Strong Start method says babies who can handle 12-minute cold immersions develop superior stress immunity. We're building something remarkable here, Mr. Whitmore. Noah is becoming what modern children aren't capable of being anymore. Strong, resilient, unbreakable." She tilted her phone toward me. An app displayed Noah's photo next to progress bars labeled cold tolerance, pain threshold, and sleep deprivation resistance. All were climbing toward a goal marked optimal hardness. "See, his cortisol adaptation curve is finally trending upward. The crying always stops once they accept that comfort is weakness." I ripped Noah from the water. His body was ice-cold and rigid, his skin mottled blue and white like marble. He wasn't shivering, which some buried instinct told me was catastrophically wrong. His breathing was rapid and shallow, his eyes glassy and empty. He didn't react when I pulled him out, didn't cry or move or recognize me at all, just hung limp in my arms while water dripped onto the tile. My wife Catherine appeared behind me, saw Noah, and started screaming. Her voice sounded distant and muffled, like I was underwater too. All I could focus on was my son's blue lips and the way his chest barely moved with each breath. "Call 911. My voice came out steady somehow. Even though my hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold Noah, Catherine was already dialing, describing symptoms in sharp, panicked bursts. Olivia stood perfectly still in the corner, her face showing concern now, but not the right kind of concern. Not fear that she'd hurt a baby, more like disappointment that I'd interrupted her work. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly, tucking her phone into her pocket. "Modern parents coddle their children until they're incapable of handling any discomfort. The Strong Start method corrects decades of soft parenting. Dr. Reeves designed this program specifically to combat the epidemic of weakness in this generation. Noah was progressing beautifully until you interfered. Get out." I stepped between her and Noah, my whole body coiled with rage I'd never felt before. "Get the fuck out of my house before I throw you out myself." Olivia picked up her bag from the counter with measured, deliberate movements. No rush, no shame, just a professional gathering her belongings after completing a task. "I'll need to report this interruption to the program coordinator," she said, pulling out a business card and setting it on the counter. "Dr. Reeves requires documentation when parents resist the protocol. It affects Noah's long-term outcomes if training gets disrupted during critical development windows. You're supposed to trust the method, Mr. Whitmore. That's what your wife agreed to when she signed up." The words hit me like cold water. Signed up. Catherine had signed up 8 months ago when she was pregnant and terrified of raising a weak child in a harsh world. She'd mentioned it once, some parenting program she'd found online. I'd been working 70-hour weeks at the firm, barely present during her pregnancy, nodding along to her anxieties without really listening. I'd thought it was prenatal classes or something harmless. "Catherine canceled that," I said, my voice tight. "She told me she changed her mind before Noah was born." Olivia's expression remained patient, like she was explaining something obvious to a slow child. "The contract states that once a Strong Start nanny is placed, the program continues regardless of parental hesitation. Parents often lose their nerve when they see their babies experiencing necessary discomfort. That's why Dr. Reeves built override protocols into every contract. The nanny maintains authority over developmental training even if parents waver." She headed toward the door, pausing to look back at Noah, who still hadn't moved or made a sound in my arms. He was so close to level 4. Now we'll have to start the cold adaptation cycle over from the beginning. Such a waste of progress. I blocked her path, my phone pressed to my ear as I gave our address to the 911 dispatcher. "You're not leaving. The police are coming. You're going to explain to them what the fuck you just did to my son." Olivia sighed like this was a minor inconvenience. "The contract includes legal protections for program facilitators. Dr. Reeves anticipated parental resistance. Every session is documented and falls within the parameters of alternative developmental care. You'll find I haven't broken any laws. Uncomfortable isn't illegal. The Strong Start method is practiced by 50,000 families in 43 countries. We have lawyers, Mr. Whitmore. Very good ones." She moved past me toward the stairs, and I let her go, too focused on the dispatcher asking questions about Noah's symptoms. I wrapped Noah in towels, but he wasn't warming up. His lips stayed purple. His breathing stayed rapid and shallow. His eyes stayed unfocused and empty. I held him against my chest and felt his heart hammering like a trapped bird while my own heart tried to break through my ribs. The doorbell rang. Paramedics flooded into the house with equipment and urgent questions. They took Noah from my arms and laid him on the bathroom floor, checking his temperature, his pulse, his pupils. One of them said core temperature out loud, and another one swore. They wrapped him in heated blankets and started an IV line in his tiny arm. His body was so cold the vein was hard to find. They worked fast and efficient while asking me questions I couldn't answer. How long was he in the water? I don't know. Has this happened before? I don't know. What's his normal temperature? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Catherine was sobbing beside me, trying to explain about the program she'd signed up for and then canceled, but the words came out jumbled and incoherent. They loaded Noah into the ambulance, and I climbed in with them while Catherine stood in the driveway in her bathrobe, barefoot and shaking. 2 police officers were talking to Olivia by her car, taking notes while she showed them something on her phone, probably her contract, her documentation, her proof that everything she'd done was sanctioned by some program that made torture sound like education. The ambulance ride took 12 minutes but felt like hours. I sat beside Noah's stretcher watching the paramedics work, listening to medical jargon I couldn't parse, trying to understand how I'd let this happen. I was supposed to protect him. That was my job as his father. And I'd failed so completely that a stranger had been torturing my son while I was at the office reviewing contracts and billing hours to clients who didn't need me as much as Noah did. The hospital emergency department was controlled chaos. They rushed Noah into a treatment room while a nurse directed me to a waiting area and promised someone would update me soon. Catherine arrived 10 minutes later, her face blotchy from crying, her hands shaking as she tried to explain what she knew about Strong Start. I found them online during my 2nd trimester, she said, her voice breaking. All these testimonials from parents whose babies were so well-behaved, so independent, so strong. I was terrified of doing everything wrong, of raising a child who couldn't handle the world. The website made it sound scientific, beneficial, like sleep training but more comprehensive. She pulled up the Strong Start homepage on her phone, showing me the smiling babies and glowing reviews. I filled out the intake forms and paid a deposit. But then I started reading the actual protocols in the welcome packet they sent. The controlled crying, the scheduled discomfort, the deliberate stress exposure. It felt wrong, so I sent emails canceling, asking for my deposit back. I thought I'd withdrawn. I looked at the website, at the testimonials describing babies who never cried or demanded attention, and felt sick. These weren't descriptions of healthy children. They were descriptions of broken ones, kids who'd learned that expressing needs brought pain, so they'd stopped expressing anything at all. Did you get confirmation that they canceled? I asked, already knowing the answer. Catherine shook her head. I never got responses to my emails, but I assumed that meant they'd processed the cancellation. When Olivia showed up 6 weeks ago saying she was our assigned Strong Start nanny, I thought there'd been some mistake. She showed me a contract with my signature and said everything was arranged. I told her I'd canceled, but she said the paperwork showed active enrollment. She was so professional, so credentialed. She had references from 3 families who said she was amazing. She started crying harder. I should have trusted my instincts, should have sent her away immediately, but she seemed so competent, and I was exhausted from maternity leave ending and going back to work. You were doing those acquisitions and working late every night. We needed help, so I told myself maybe I'd been wrong to cancel. Maybe the program wasn't as extreme as I'd thought, and she was so good with Noah at first. He seemed fine. A doctor appeared, pulling off latex gloves, his expression carefully neutral. I'm Dr. Yoon. Noah's core temperature dropped to 92 degrees. That's severe hypothermia. We've got him stabilized and warming gradually, but we need to run tests for organ damage. Another 15 minutes in that water and we'd be looking at cardiac arrest. He pulled out a tablet showing test results. His blood work shows stress hormones at levels we typically see in trauma patients. Not normal for a 6-month-old. He swiped to another screen showing images I couldn't interpret. We also found older injuries. Bruising on his ribs consistent with sustained pressure. Burst blood vessels in his eyes suggesting prolonged crying. Evidence of chronic sleep deprivation based on his cortisol patterns. This wasn't a one-time incident. Someone has been systematically harming this baby for weeks. Catherine made a sound like she'd been punched. I felt my hands clench into fists, my lawyer brain automatically cataloging everything the doctor said as evidence while my father brain screamed that I'd missed all of this. The signs had been there. Noah had been fussier lately, crying more, harder to soothe. I'd attributed it to normal baby behavior and worked later hours to avoid the stress at home. I'm a mandatory reporter, Dr. Yoon continued. This level of injury requires immediate CPS notification. Someone has been abusing your son. He made notes on his tablet while reality reformed around us. Child Protective Services. Investigation. They were going to investigate us because we'd hired someone to hurt our baby and hadn't noticed for 6 weeks. A social worker arrived within 30 minutes, a middle-aged woman named Grace Hutchins who carried a thick folder and asked questions in a gentle voice that made everything worse. I explained about the Strong Start method, about Catherine's sign-up and attempted cancellation, about Olivia's claims that she had legal authority over Noah's care. Grace's expression shifted from professional neutrality to something darker as I talked. "You're the fourth family that's contacted CPS about Strong Start this month," she said quietly. "We've had multiple reports of infant hospitalizations linked to their program, but they have very aggressive legal representation, and every parent has signed extensive contracts. The nannies are trained to document everything, and they claim it's all sanctioned." She pulled out her tablet and showed us the Strong Start website. More testimonials filled the screen, parents praising how the program had transformed their children. "My son learned that crying doesn't solve problems by 4 months old," one father wrote. "He sits quietly for hours now without needing entertainment or attention. The Strong Start method works." I felt sick reading the testimonials. These parents thought they were describing success, but they were describing trauma. Babies who'd learned helplessness. Children whose spirits had been broken so thoroughly they'd stopped fighting for their needs. Grace scrolled through dozens more posts, each one celebrating behaviors that should have alarmed any parent paying attention. Strong Start was founded by Dr. Leonard Reeves, Grace said, pulling up another document. Pediatrician who lost his medical license in 2019 after a clinical trial resulted in an infant death. He was testing extreme sleep training protocols that caused seizures. The baby died from complications. He rebranded as a parenting consultant afterward and started this program. Catherine grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "He killed a baby? And he's allowed to run this program?" Grace's expression was grim. "He's technically not practicing medicine. He's offering developmental guidance. His lawyers have successfully argued that parents choose his method voluntarily and the nannies simply follow parental instructions. The legal distinction has protected him so far." She showed us Catherine's contract, the 50-page agreement she'd signed while pregnant and hopeful and terrified. I read through it with my lawyer eyes and felt my stomach drop. Section 23 gave the Strong Start facilitator final authority over all developmental decisions. Section 31 required payment for the full program, regardless of withdrawal attempts. Section 19 mandated that the facilitator complete the training protocol, even if parents requested termination. "This can't be enforceable," I said, my voice hard. "You can't contract away a child's safety." But even as I said it, I knew how Strong Start's lawyers would argue it. Parental rights, alternative medicine protections, freedom to choose unconventional childcare methods. I'd made similar arguments defending corporate clients who operated in legal gray areas. I knew exactly how they'd position this. Grace's expression suggested she'd been through this before. "They've won in court 4 times. Parents who tried to sue ended up owing legal fees and additional program costs. Their lawyers are very good at what they do." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "But there's something you should know. There are other families fighting this. Parents who've had similar experiences and are building a case. If you're willing to go public with what happened to Noah, there's an attorney who wants to help." She handed me a business card. "Attorney Melissa Kwan, Family Law and Child Advocacy." I pocketed it and asked when we could see Noah. Grace said soon, once the doctors finished their initial assessments. She needed to complete her investigation first, which meant interviewing us separately, photographing Noah's injuries, reviewing our home for safety concerns. Standard protocol when abuse was suspected. I sat through the interview answering questions about our work schedules, Noah's daily routines, how we'd selected Olivia as our nanny. Every answer felt like an admission of failure. Yes, we both worked full-time. Yes, we relied heavily on childcare. Yes, we'd trusted Olivia based on references without doing deeper background checks. Yes, we'd noticed Noah seemed unhappier lately, but attributed it to normal development. We'd failed at every level to protect our son. Catherine's interview took longer. I could hear her crying through the walls of the conference room where Grace had taken her. When she emerged, her eyes were red and swollen, her face pale. "They're going to take him," she whispered. Grace said until they determine whether we're fit parents, there will be supervision requirements. They might place Noah in foster care. The possibility hadn't occurred to me that saving Noah from Olivia might mean losing him to the state, that our failure to recognize the abuse might be judged as negligence serious enough to terminate our custody. I was a corporate attorney who billed $500 an hour advising clients on merger agreements, and I couldn't protect my own son from a nanny who'd been torturing him in plain sight. Dr. Yoon came out 2 hours later and said we could see Noah. We followed him through double doors into a treatment area where our son lay in a heated bed surrounded by monitors. He was awake now, crying weakly, and the sound was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard because it meant he was alive and aware and responding. I touched his hand, and he wrapped his tiny fingers around mine, his grip weak but present. Catherine stood on the other side of the bed, tears streaming down her face, whispering apologies Noah couldn't understand. I wanted to apologize too, wanted to explain that I'd failed him but would spend the rest of my life making it right. But what good were words? I'd missed 6 weeks of systematic abuse because I was too busy building my career to notice my son was suffering. We stayed with Noah all day, while doctors ran tests and specialists evaluated him for long-term damage. The neurologist said hypothermia could cause developmental delays, that we'd need to monitor his progress carefully. The pediatric psychologist said infant trauma could affect attachment and stress responses for years. They gave us pages of information about what to watch for, warning signs that might indicate problems down the line. Catherine called her sister to bring us clothes and food. I called my boss and told him I was taking family leave immediately, undefined duration. He asked if everything was okay, and I said no, nothing was okay, and I'd explain later. Then I turned off my phone and focused on Noah, on memorizing the sound of his breathing and the warmth of his skin and the way his eyes tracked my movement around the room. They discharged Noah 3 days later with instructions to follow up with specialists and return immediately if we noticed any concerning symptoms. Grace came by before we left and explained that CPS would be making home visits and we'd need to complete parenting classes. The investigation would take months. If they determined we'd been negligent in our supervision of Noah's care, there would be consequences. The house felt wrong when we came home. Catherine had already removed everything associated with Olivia while we were at the hospital. The bathroom where I'd found Noah had been scrubbed clean, but I still couldn't look at the sink without seeing his blue lips and empty eyes. I told Catherine we were moving. I didn't care about real estate markets or mortgage rates. We were finding a new house where Noah could grow up without these memories embedded in the walls. I called attorney Melissa Kwan from my home office, while Catherine settled Noah for a nap. She answered on the second ring and listened without interrupting while I described everything. The ice bath, the app, Olivia's explanations, the contract that apparently gave her authority over our son's care despite our withdrawal attempts. "You're the 9th family that's contacted me this month," Melissa said when I finished. "Strong Start is escalating. Dr. Reeves is pushing for more extreme methods to prove his theories. The app you saw is new. They're collecting data on thousands of babies, tracking stress responses and pain thresholds. It's human experimentation disguised as parenting advice." She explained she was working with families across 6 states, building a case that showed systematic abuse rather than isolated incidents. But we need evidence that breaks through their legal protections, something that proves they're deliberately harming children, not just offering controversial parenting advice. "Do you have any way to access that app you saw?" I didn't, but I knew people who could help. Tech consultants who specialized in data recovery and digital forensics, corporate investigators who tracked down hidden information for litigation. I'd spent 15 years building a network of experts who helped me win cases for clients. Now I'd use every resource I had to destroy Strong Start. It took me 3 days to find someone who could help. A former hacker named Dimitri, who'd gone legitimate and now ran a cybersecurity firm. I hired him to track down everything he could find about Strong Start's digital infrastructure. He came back a week later with files that made me physically ill. Internal databases showing detailed logs from nannies worldwide, training manuals describing pain tolerance exercises and hunger cycles, financial records proving Dr. Reeves had made $14 million in 3 years, and most damning, files labeled adverse outcomes containing reports on 23 babies who died during the program. I read through death reports that used clinical language to describe babies dying from hypothermia, starvation, stress-induced seizures. Dr. Reeves had written notes in the margins calling the deaths unfortunate but acceptable losses for groundbreaking research. He'd known babies were dying and had adjusted his protocols slightly and continued placing nannies in homes with new victims. I sent everything to Melissa. She called me back within an hour, her voice tight with controlled fury. "This is it. This is what we need to shut them down permanently. Can your source testify to how he obtained this information?" I said yes, Dimitri would testify. He'd found the data through legal means, tracking digital footprints and accessing information that Strong Start hadn't properly secured. Everything was admissible. Melissa filed a criminal complaint with the FBI 2 days later. Human experimentation on minors, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit child abuse across state lines. She included Dimitri's evidence, medical records from hospitalized babies, death certificates, and testimonies from 15 families willing to speak publicly. The FBI raided Strong Start Solutions within a week. They seized computers and files from Dr. Reeves's offices and home. They coordinated with police departments across 6 states to place protective holds on babies currently in the program. Agents showed up at nannies' homes with warrants and questions. Strong Start's lawyers tried to block the investigation, but the evidence was overwhelming. Dr. Reeves held a press conference claiming persecution, but his calm explanations couldn't erase the internal documents describing babies as experimental subjects. Parents who'd defended the program started quietly withdrawing as they realized what they'd enrolled in. The backlash was brutal. Our names got leaked somehow, and I started receiving threats on social media. Strong Start defenders called us weak parents destroying a program because we couldn't handle our child experiencing necessary discomfort. One man sent me dozens of messages explaining how his military training had prepared him for life's challenges, and modern children needed similar toughening from birth. I hired private security after someone showed up at our house taking photos. Catherine was terrified to leave Noah with anyone, barely sleeping, constantly checking his breathing. I took complete leave from work and became his primary caregiver, while she slowly recovered from the trauma of realizing she'd signed our son up for systematic torture. The criminal trial started 8 months after the FBI raid. Dr. Reeves faced 38 counts. I testified on day 5, walking the jury through finding Noah in the ice bath and reading from the database logs that described his suffering in clinical terms. Several jurors were crying by the time I finished. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. Medical experts testified about brain damage caused by hypothermia and chronic stress. Parents described watching their babies deteriorate. The defense tried arguing that Dr. Reeves was simply offering alternative parenting methods, but the internal documents destroyed that defense. He'd known babies were dying and hadn't cared as long as he got his data. The jury convicted him on all counts after 3 days of deliberation. The judge sentenced him to 18 years in federal prison. Strong Start Solutions was dissolved and its assets seized. The nannies were investigated individually. Olivia was convicted of child abuse and sentenced to 8 years. Noah is 3 years old now. He's developing normally according to specialists, but he has nightmares and a terror of bathtubs that might never fully fade. The neurologist says those 6 weeks of trauma happened during critical brain development and could affect his stress responses permanently. We won't know the full impact until he's older. I left the law firm and started doing pro bono work for families fighting cases like ours. Catherine went back to school to become a child psychologist specializing in infant trauma. We're using our experience to help others, to make sure what happened to Noah stops happening to other babies. 43 families joined our class action lawsuit against Strong Start's remaining assets. The trials will take years, but we're committed to seeing it through. Some parents still defend Dr. Reeves, convinced their children's emotional shutdown is actually superior development. I don't know how to reach people who see their baby's trauma response as strength rather than damage. What I do know is that Noah laughs when we play, cries when he's hurt, and climbs into my lap when he needs comfort. Every normal emotional expression is proof he survived an attempt to break his spirit, and I'm never missing another moment of his life, never prioritizing my career over his well-being, never trusting anyone with his care without absolute certainty they'll protect him the way I failed to do. He's beautifully, perfectly soft in a world that tried to make him hard, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure he stays that way.